Good afternoon. I'm Gayle Dendinger. I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Business Roundtable. Our show, COBRT and Friends, gives us the ability to talk to influential people around the state, around the country, and around the world. We'll be discussing today a whole number of issues with my very, very good friend Dale Eisler, who I knew as the Consul General of Colorado about 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah, I left in 2011.
And how often do you get a chance to come back to Colorado?
I try to come back at least once a year, and so far I've been doing that. So, I mean, every opportunity, put it this way, every opportunity I get to come back to Colorado and to Denver, I jump at it, as does my wife, because we loved it when we lived here.
So you've got a pretty spotted past. Do you mind going through and talking a little bit about your career?
Well, sure. And currently, I'm now at the University of Regina in Regina, Saskatchewan. I'm at the public policy school there. It's called the Johnson Shreyama Graduate School of Public Policy. So I'm doing a bit of teaching and writing there. And I'm also a senior advisor on government relations for the university president at the University of Regina. So I'm doing those two things right now. And I'll sort of work backwards. And previous to that, I was in Ottawa I was with the federal government of Canada for a number of years, and I was at my last position there was at Natural Resources Canada, which is like the energy department in Canada, and I was assistant deputy minister for energy security. And prior to that, I was here in Denver as Consul General for Canada for the region, which was Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and Montana was the region that I represented as Consul General with our other consular officials here in Denver. And then before that, I was in what's called the Privy Council office in Ottawa with the federal government. And the Privy Council office, the best description is the Department of the Prime Minister in Canada. It's kind of the bureaucratic side of the Prime Minister's office. There's a political side too, which is the Prime Minister's office, but the Privy Council office works with the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's staff. And then before that, I was with the Department of Finance in Canada. And then prior to that, before I joined the federal government, I was a journalist for many years in Western Canada. So that's kind of been my career track.
And before the show, we were talking about what might show up on our tombstones. Can you talk about what you said?
Yeah, well, we were just talking about, as you say, things people try to do, through the course of your career. And at the end of the day, what you hope is going to be on your tombstone is something to the effect that he was a good guy, because ultimately that's what matters in life, right? It's not sort of what you necessarily can accumulate, which is all great when you're living, but ultimately people are going to remember you as he or she was a very good person,
Right.
and that's what ultimately matters.
He that dies with the most toys wins. Right?
Yeah, exactly. There's that old saying.
So then you're very much a family man. Can you talk about your family a little bit?
Sure. So I'm my wife Louise and we've been married. I better get this right. 40,
You better get this right.
Yeah, 43 years.
Do you know the date? That's pretty important too.
Now you're asking tough questions, Gil. I mean, October 9th.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it is October 9th.
Hey, punning's fine.
It was Canadian Thanksgiving weekend,
Okay.
actually, that we got married. At any rate, and we're kind of high school sweethearts. We met in high school, and so we've been together a long time. And needless to say, Louise is a wonderful person. You've met her. I think you know her. But anyway, and we just have one daughter. She's married. We've got 2 grandkids, and we're living close to them now because we moved back to Saskatchewan where they are. Yeah, so all is good. My wife is enjoying being back with our daughter, her husband, and our grandkids, as I am.
Can you talk a little bit about your mother?
Yeah.
Well, if your father and your mother, but I'm asking about your mother for a specific purpose.
Sure. Well, my parents were both like German ancestry, and my mother's story, I think, is kind of the more interesting one. Her and her siblings and my grandmother emigrated they were in the Ukraine area of Russia, and they came to Canada in 1925. Right, at any rate, and settled in farming area of Saskatchewan, and they were my grandmother and her children. She had 10 kids. Were kind of forced to leave. They were living in a small German community in the Black Sea area of Russia at the time, and it was after the Russian Revolution, and my grandfather was killed, as were the other men in that small little German village. It was all part of kind of the Civil War after the Revolution. They were sort of just executed in effect, and by Bolshevik militia at the time, who were kind of going through the countryside, sort of cleansing the area of landowners and whatnot. And my mother's parents and her family, they were farmers and landowners. And at any rate, obviously a very difficult time for my grandmother and her children, and they ultimately were able to escape and come to Canada in 1925. And it's hard to imagine what that must have been like, traveling all the way from near the Black Sea in Russia across Europe to get to London to get on or England to get on a boat to come across the Atlantic, and then travel by train across Canada to the prairies to Homestead. A woman and her, not all 10 kids came. I think 7 of them were able to get out with her. But at any rate, that's kind of their story.
So then at some point in time, Dale, then you were inspired to write the book Anton. I don't know if this can be seen. It'd be nice if it was really, really, really big. And so this is inspired a lot by your mother, your mother being young, about 4 or 5 years of age when all this happened to her dad.
Yeah.
This is my special copy, but you can hold it for a little bit. But can you talk about the book and really the ties between your family and what happened and the point of view in this book and why you wrote it?
Yeah, well, I was a journalist for many years, as I think I mentioned. So I've written throughout much of my life, and I enjoy writing. And I'd written 2 previous books, non-fiction books. This one is historical fiction, but it's based on a true story, my mother's family story. And there was this sort of thread of a story in my mother's family's history about my grandfather being killed on this day, August 31st, 1919. My mother was like 4 years old at the time. She was the youngest of the kids, and she had this faint memory of it, right, of her father being taken outside and shot in front of the family, in front of her mother and her brothers and sisters, right? So pretty traumatic thing. And I was always fascinated by this, and I always thought, geez, I need to know more about that. So I would, my mother was so young at the time, her memory was fairly faint, right? But her older brothers and sisters had come to Canada, my uncles and aunts who farmed and did other things, they obviously would have a better memory because they were older when it happened. And I would talk to them on occasion about it, trying to find out more, but they would get very emotional. So I always felt guilty, and I would stop. You don't want to upset them. So I never really did develop like a good sense of the entire story. And one by one they passed away, as they got older. And my mother was the youngest and the last surviving one. And I really wanted to do something with it. So I took this sort of germ of a story about what happened on that day in this village, did some other research around the period and the time, and built this story, Anton, a young boy, his friend in the Russian Revolution, around it. And it's historical fiction novel, but based on a true story.
My wife and I were in Florida about 3-4 months ago, and there's an author down there. His name is Randy Wayne White. We call him Wendy Wayne White. But anyway, Wendy, it's a little bit like the story that you have. He starts out with something that's got a little bit of truth to it, and then just builds these incredible stories. So how do you get your imagination engaged? Do you do things before you go to bed? I mean, I feel like the great writers and great songwriters, that they have something that the rest of us don't have, where it just flows freely.
Yeah.
Whereas the rest of us have to work so hard and then we don't get anything. Do you have a gift like that?
Gail, I don't know if it's a gift or not. I mean, writing can be difficult for anybody at times, you can't assume necessarily writers that it comes easily for them. For me, I can't even describe the process. It just sort of happens, right? And
well, that's what I suspect. Just here it is. Here's a couple pages. Here's
I found
a day's
with
work.
this, like Anton, the character Anton is actually sort of notionally based on my mother's older brother, Tony,
right.
Anton, right? So I kind of use him as the voice for this book. It's Anton, this young boy, living through this period, talking about it in this small village and what happened to his father and everything else around it, and the ultimate escape to the new world. I found, I guess, with this, once I was comfortable with Anton's voice, like I was a young boy, him
Right.
talking about his life and what was happening. It makes it easier when you it feels like it's your own voice, right? And you use your own memories of as a me as a man, a boy,
Right.
growing up as a little kid, and my boyhood memories. I can recall them, and I just sort of try to apply the same sort of universal things that young boys would do and engage in and think, right? And actually, the other thing that helped me about it was my own grandkids, um, because when I saw them, at my oldest when she was like 4 and 5 years old, which is kind of around where,
Right.
and
Right.
I could see how much she was aware of things, right, around her, more so than you would realize. So that helped me sort of give perspective to
Right.
Anton as a 5-year-old,
So
and the things
everybody
that
was 5 years old from 2 or 3 different generations. That's pretty cool.
yeah,
So then there's other bridges that you built too. There's a bridge, there's the generation bridge, and then there's the bridge that was built from the Ukraine to Canada. So once your family moved to Canada, then what happened?
well, my mother met my father. My father, who was living in, a young fellow living in Saskatchewan, actually in a different part of the province, but farming province. And during the Depression, the 1930s, when crop failures and
Right.
whatnot, people would move around trying to find work, and he ended up in the community, the small farming town where my mother was, right, as a young woman, and they met, and they got married in early 40s. And then my dad, he was running the co-op store or working at the co-op store in this small town. So he kind of got into the sort of that kind of business, the store, grocery store kind of business. Anyway, he worked at the co-op store, and then he moved and managed a hardware store in a different town for a time. And then in it would be the sort of mid 50s, he scraped together enough money to buy a little sort of corner grocery store in the city of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, which is where I grew up, right? And we lived next door to the store. The store and the house were connected together, and it was one of these situations where I think back to my mom and dad. I mean, they worked 7 days a week. The store was open every day, right? And it was just them, right? And me and my brother and my sister, we would help out in the store, But that's what the way it was in those days. It was a very community kind of store. People in the neighborhood would come, and they'd have charge accounts and things like that. I would deliver groceries and things like that.
I don't know if I'm going to have time enough on this segment for a little story, but one of my friends is named Anton. He is Greek, and he was telling the story about his grandfather was trying to find a wife and went over a couple different villages and fell in love, found this really beautiful woman and fell in love with her, and was about to get married to her, and found out that she wasn't a virgin. So he was just totally devastated. So he's going from this town back to his hometown. He
Yeah,
stops in this middle town, and he's talking to this bartender and complaining what had happened. The bartender said, "Well, I know this woman in this town. She's, and I can guarantee that she, has not been with a man. She's my daughter, and the reason she hasn't been with anybody is because she's so homely." He ended up marrying her, and now Grandpa tells his story all the time. He's got Grandma sitting here.
yeah,
This is how they met.
yeah.
Anton.
Well,
This is
that's one way.
710 KNUS. We'll be back in a few minutes. I'll probably get coached in between segments. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're back, and as suspected, I was severely admonished during the break. So, Dale, for the rest of the show, I'm going to try to behave myself. I do apologize.
I'll try to keep you
publicly.
in line, Gil.
We can do that. You kind of
Okay.
slap me around a little
Okay.
bit.
All right.
Actually, the way that you and I met, we started out behaving ourselves a little bit, and by the end of our first conversation, I think both of us were rascals, and that's part of the reason why I think we like each other. So how important is that when you're dealing with the public to have a professional facade, but at some point in time, just be Dale or just be Gail? Because that's
Yeah.
what I like about you, is you're one of the most human people that I ever met.
Well, thanks, and I appreciate that, and certainly the same for you. To me, if you don't connect as kind of a person with someone, that's what makes things work. And in personal relationships, obviously, but also in professional and business relationships. I mean, in business, you need obviously have a professional relationship with people you deal with in business, colleagues and others. But also the ones that the kind of relationships that really thrive and are beneficial to both sides are the ones where there is a good personal connection to, where you feel that your sort of relationship with an individual is more than just business, right? It might be framed around business, but you also like the individual as a person.
How do you become a consul general? What's the process?
Well, there is no real, well, I mean, no specific process as such. I mean, the majority of, I wasn't a foreign service officer, so I, got into government, was doing different things, and the opportunity came along because they will take people from outside the foreign service within
Right.
government for positions, so that's how I got it. I was at the Privy Council Office Department of the Prime Minister at the time, and they said there's this position, and I was sort of at that point looking like I'd like to do something different, try a change, and the position in Denver was available, so that's how I got it. But a majority of the positions are within the kind of Canadian Foreign Service or the U.S. Foreign Service in terms of diplomats in the U.S. And these are people who are career Foreign Service officers, who go into the Foreign Service and stay in it and rotate to different positions around internationally or within the State Department in the United States or with the Department of Foreign Affairs in Canada. So it can be either way. You can be a member of the Foreign Service professionally, or you can be someone else in government, or even outside of government. They'll pick people, right, who have a certain skill set that they'll appoint.
And what are some of the responsibilities of a consul general?
Well, you are the Canadian representative for the government of Canada in that region. So you are kind of the face and voice of the government of Canada in the region that you're assigned to. So your responsibilities are economic in terms of sort of developing and nurturing economic ties between the two countries, working together with people in the United States with common interests in Canada. How can you build business relationships and facilitate greater business opportunities back and forth between Canada and the United States? And of course, Canada and the United States have a fantastic relationship, economic and social and political relationship. It's the biggest bilateral economic relationship in the world by far. Canada, the United States. The United States trade with Canada dwarfs all other countries, whether you talk about Japan, Europe, or whatever it might be. And people take it for granted, right? They don't even think about it, mainly because they don't have to, because it works so well. Because we've got these common language and common values for the most part, and we've got a history of working together. So, as Consul General, you're there to further that relationship and take care of that relationship economically, but also in terms of social and cultural exchanges between the two countries, academic exchanges where universities can work together. So it's all about ensuring the relationship continues to work well together and deal with any issues that might emerge and facilitate ties between the two countries.
Is it a great job?
It's a great job. It really is a great job. You have lots of latitude and you get to meet wonderful people. I got to meet you as an example, which never would have happened if I hadn't had this job. And I met all kinds of other people in Denver and Colorado and in the region. And I like to believe friendships that exist to this day. They're great people. And, to me, it just sort of validates that Canada-U.S. relationship because it's really about people, ultimately. That's what relationships are.
Can you talk about some of the people that you've met, maybe something that you admired or some characteristic that you remember? Because I can tell just from looking at the different websites about you that you have lots of connections and lots of friends.
Well,
Tucker Hart Adams.
Yeah, Tucker Hart. Tucker, and Tucker's a wonderful woman. She's Colorado Springs and an economist.
Right.
That was interesting because I remember not long after I came to Denver, I'm driving to work one morning and I've got the radio on. I think it was maybe NPR or whatever it was, and there's a story about the economy and whatnot, and they have Tucker on,
right,
commenting on the economy. And I listened to her, and I thought, geez, that's an interesting. I need to meet her.
Boy, she's smart.
Yeah, she's smart, and it's a woman. I'd like to,
right,
if I can, meet her. And so I got to the office, and I forget exactly how, but I found out where I could call her or send her an email, anyways, and she quickly replied and said that she was in Colorado Springs, and I said, well, if you're ever in Denver, and you got a moment to stop by, please do. Well, she took the opportunity very quickly. In a week or two, she came to my office, and we had a great conversation, and that led to what I think is a friendship to this day. Right? So those sorts of things, and I think as Consul General, you have the opportunity to meet all kinds of people. It's the nature of your job, and so it opens up a whole kind of vista of people from all walks of life that you get to know in short order. So it's been great.
So your whole life, or at least a majority of your life, you've had one foot in public policy and the other foot in business, and they're actually mixed. So can you talk a little bit about your job right now at the university in Regina and the relationship between business and public policy?
Sure. Well, at the public policy school, public policy relates to, when you say public policy, it tends to be government policy.
Right, it's bigger.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. But within that, obviously, good public policy is also good business policy, right? And it sort of balances these things out. So it's about how do you achieve, how does policy help create a framework for business to thrive and to achieve broader sort of social community goals that you want to do. How do these things come together? And public policy is largely the instrument that government uses to achieve that. So, in a sense, public policy is kind of where politics and the economy meet, right? And we have politics because that's how we elect governments and whatnot. And so, okay, how do you take ideas and opinions and views that are created in the political arena and apply that now in a policy sense that's going to work in an economy and in a society? So it's trying to fit those pieces together. So it's hugely challenging. I mean, as you can see from all governments, right? I know it's easy to be critical of governments and politicians, but one thing I've learned is I have nothing but respect for all politicians. I don't care what stripe they are. They're all there to do what they believe is the right thing to do good, and they're committed to it. Will there be some bad apples on occasion? Yes, as there is in anything, right? But the vast majority of them are people that sacrifice a lot and are out there and when they're vulnerable, they can be attacked and criticized, but they're trying to do the right thing, and I respect them for that.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I would never get into politics just watching. I don't have the self-sacrifice, I think, to go out there and work that hard and get beat up that much.
Yeah, it's you put yourself at risk, and it's easy to be critical, to sit on the sidelines and be critical of others who are out there trying to do something, and that's not to say people shouldn't be critical, but you also have to be, respect their goodwill, because I think they are acting in the best interest, what they believe to be the best interests of the country, the state, the community, wherever it is that they're engaged.
You've had an opportunity to work with Prime Minister Harper a number of times, is that right?
Yep.
What is he like?
Oh, he's a very smart, dedicated, I think, focused individual. I think he's very clear-minded in terms of what he wants to achieve, and can set out issues in a way that brings that kind of clarity to them in terms of what specifically his objectives are. So I think he's a very effective politician. He's facing an election. There's going to be a federal election in Canada in October, and the polls are very close these days. So, and he's been in power now for 10 years. So, you get to a point with governments often that there's mood for change,
right?
And to a certain extent, I think he's facing.
So
that.
It sounds like there's not term limits then.
No, there's not term limits in Canada. You're elected as long as you're elected.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
people might think there should be, but
Yeah, I don't know. I think that if somebody knows how to do the job and you got the ability to go toss them out, it's a pretty good system.
Yeah, I think that's in Canada we believe it's like if somebody can be elected, then fair enough. But I understand the U.S. system, fear of entrenched power, and the incumbency also gives the person who's running for re-election a bit of an edge because they're better known because they've been in government.
Well, Dale, you and I could probably talk for days. We are running out of time. In fact, we've probably gone over a little bit. Just to remind everybody, this is 710 KNUS. This is the Colorado Business Roundtable show. If you want to go find information on the Colorado Business Roundtable, you can find us at COBRT.com. Where can people find your book?
Well, you can order the book, the easiest these days.
And what's the name again?
It's called Anton, a
And
young
it looks
boy.
just like this, right?
Yep, that's it. Anton, a young boy, his friend, and the Russian Revolution. So you can, go on Barnes and Noble, I guess, here in the U.S. And order it that way. I know a Tattered Cover here in Denver had it at
Right.
one point, but they would. It's been a few years, so I think they would have to order it in. I don't know
Right.
if they'll have it in stock, but you can get it online.
So the rest of the show you can go find on our website as streaming video. I'm going to ask a little bit more about the movie possibilities that you have with this book, Dale. I forgot to talk about that before, and we shouldn't let that go away.
Yeah, no problem.
So you're going to be rich and famous, is that right?
Well, I don't know about that.
Isn't it you're rich and famous if you go raise the money to go help yourself be rich and famous and be
Yeah.
lucky? Is
Yeah,
that how
that's
it
right.
works?
I think that's how it works, exactly.
But I understand there's a director over in Europe that's very interested in your story.
There is a fellow that actually was nominated for an Academy Award this year and a Golden Globe Award for as Best Director of Foreign Language Film. And he's European. He's from actually Tbilisi, Georgia, and who's read the script.
Is that by Atlanta?
By Atlanta? No, it's not by Atlanta. It's a long ways from Atlanta, actually. But at any rate, he's read the script that I wrote based on the book and is interested in doing something with it. But we'll see. It's a long road.
So when you write a script, does it look like the scripts we see on television? It's 8.5 by 11, and
Yeah, but the scripts have their own format,
Okay.
template, and the scripts are mostly dialogue, right? Scripts for like a movie or whatever.
Right.
There will be some scene, description, narrative of a scene, introducing a scene,
right?
right? But then the story is carried mostly by dialogue of the characters, of the actors.
So do you put little footnotes in like angry or
Yep.
emotional
yeah,
on
you
all
can,
that?
Yeah, you do that. Although sometimes, hopefully. The scene is such that people will draw that from it, and a director
Right.
will do what he needs to do with characters.
So do you talk about the settings too? Like this chapter, the setting is
Yeah.
by a forest, and
Yeah,
so
exactly.
what else is in there? I haven't done anything like this since I was in grade school. I think
Yeah,
book
well,
report. It's like a book report, right? Kind of.
no, it's sort of. I mean,
Is it-
you,
it's-
you
it's-
set up a scene. You'll say first thing you say is interior or exterior. First of all,
Okay.
the shot, and then you describe, daytime, nighttime, whatever, and then a brief description of sort of where it is in the scene, and if it's in a room or it's outside in on a road or whatever it might be. So that kind of gives a little frame for this scene itself, and then it's the dialogue that happens, and again, and then with interspersed with sort of notes of action or whatever it might be.
Here now, Anton the book.
Mm-hmm.
Coming soon, Anton the movie. Consul General, author, politician, not really a politician,
not a
public
politician.
servant.
Yeah.
Public servant extraordinaire, and my friend Dale Eisler. Thank you for stopping by and taking time today. It's so nice to see you again. It can't be so long anymore.
Well, Gail, it's a real pleasure, and I really thank you for the opportunity to join, the program and talk about part of the country that I love, and the people here. They're all wonderful.
Pretty nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gail.
Signing off.
Thank you for joining us for Connect and Collaborate. We're starting off our Brave Leaders segment, and today we're talking with Dale Eisler. Dale, welcome.
Hi, Tammy. It's good to be here.
So, Dale, tell us a little bit about your history for our listeners. You were the Canadian Consulate General for Denver for some time.
That's right. Yeah, I was Consul General here from 2007 to 2011. Which was a great time to be here. Well, it's a great place to be at any time. But I covered the region of Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and Montana as Consul General for Canada, and developed a lot of great relationships while I was here, and maintain a big interest in Colorado and region. Try to stay in touch with people, follow issues as best as I can, and I feel like I actually learned a lot while I was here about the community and about the people here, and who really impressed me in terms of their commitment to their community.
Absolutely. And you probably have the most unique perspective on who are the leaders in Denver and Colorado and the region from that seat as Consulate General.
Yeah, well, that's the great thing about that position is you get to meet lots of people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sort of comes with the territory in terms of the position you've got, and so it gives you access to all kinds of interesting people, all walks of life, business, cultural, sort of civic, political, both at the state level and federal. So, I really was thankful for the opportunity to spend time here and be able to meet the range of people that I did. And in other jobs you wouldn't get that chance. But the nature of Consul General, you do get to develop quite a network.
Now, as part of our Brave Leader series, Gayle Dendinger nominated you as a Brave Leader. What does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, I'm flattered that Gayle would do that. I don't know how brave I am. I'm a big chicken, actually, when it comes to any kind of bravery. So I appreciate it, the nomination. Not sure how worthy I am of it or deserving, but but we need brave leaders. We need more brave leaders all the time in both the United States and Canada, because ultimately it's about people who demonstrate leadership that move communities forward, that bring people together, that deal with difficult issues. And being named a brave leader, I think, is a great honor.
What does that mean to you, a brave leader? Do you consider yourself brave?
Well, I don't know if I consider myself brave. I just try to be. I think my father taught me. Well, the thing I remember about my dad when I was growing up is how everybody kind of respected my father and liked him. He was really sort of liked by everybody, and I've tried to emulate that in my life as best I can. That ultimately that's what matters, that people see you as a decent person, a trustworthy person. And I think ultimately that brave leaders have those qualities. And I'm not saying I necessarily have them, but I try to have them. And they're people who have a vision that's much bigger than themselves and their own kind of personal attainment. It's about what can they do for others. How can they make where they live a better place? How can they help deal with issues that are challenging for their community? That's what brave leaders do.
When is the time that you feel you've had to be brave in doing something you believed in? You're proud to stand up for something.
Well, I don't know if I can identify anything as such. I mean, the nature of my career has been, in government, you get involved in different issues, but you're part of a much bigger kind of process, right?
Right.
It's not so much
You're
about
connecting people.
Yeah, I'm connecting people, and so it's not so much about yourself. It's about sort of a larger objective that you have become part of because of it's the nature of your work in government, for example, if you're in government. But I did have I had spent some time in private business too with my brother years back, and I'm actually quite proud of this. It was a small business, and I was he was he operated the business. I was sort of the silent partner, But we sort of we had like 8 or at our peak, I think we had 10 employees, so it was a very small little business, and it was a company that repaired diesel fuel systems, believe it or not. It was kind of a specialized sort of thing. And I felt very proud about, meeting a payroll and helping raise money to start a business and, borrowing money and putting it into the business and, building clients and things like that. And I was sort of doing this, not full-time because my brother was running the business and I was just kind of his silent partner in this, but I was engaged in it. And it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about the challenges of business and the pressure that people in business, smaller business particularly, but all business, what you face, when the economy gets tough and you got payroll to meet and whatnot, that can be very stressful. And I remember going through some stressful times during that point in my life. So I'm proud of that.
Yeah, you have to make decisions that affect a lot of people when you're running a business. Pardon me. And now you're living in Canada again, but have a very fond love for Denver, don't you?
I do.
What about Colorado Do you think a state can be brave? And what does Colorado demonstrate to you?
Well, Colorado has this, I think, an image of a state that is progressive in many ways, and I think it's the whole sort of notion of Colorado. It's a Western state that's got an entrepreneurial spirit to it because
Mm-hmm.
of kind of that frontier mentality, which still exists, in the West, even in Canada. So there's that dimension to it, and it's the landscape of Colorado is so gorgeous and
Mm.
beautiful that adds to its kind of allure to people, and it's got kind of all the facets of U.S. society here in terms of people who, well, they love the outdoors, people of the farming community. You have, I think, people who are very individualistic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the nature of the geography of the state and whatnot. So I think people in Canada, when they think of Colorado, they may not know it well, but they have a very positive view of it. Beautiful state,
Right.
and a state with people who are very um, entrepreneurial and progressive in their outlook.
Yeah. So speaking of brave leaders, who do you view as a brave leader?
It's an interesting question, and I was thinking a bit about that. And I have to say that a person that I likely admire more than anybody is a woman named Teresa Stevenson, and this goes back many years now. And I, haven't stayed in touch with her because this was back when I lived in Saskatchewan as a younger person, and I was, working at the time. I was actually as a journalist. This is a woman who uh, started a program called Chili for Children, and it was in a neighborhood of the city of Regina, poorer neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
in the city, where there are a lot of native Indian people, kids living there, and they were going to school hungry. Many of them weren't getting the proper nutrition. And on her own, she started this hot lunch program in kind of the community center in this neighborhood, where 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, she would serve a hot lunch, chili for these kids, and did it all on her own. Didn't seek money from other people or other sources or government. She just did it. It needed to be done, and it really blossomed into something that was quite tremendous. Went on for years and years, still going.
Wow.
And yeah, and there was a few times um, I went up. These people would go to help out serve lunch, and I went a couple of times. It was really quite something to see these poor little kids, who needed some a hot lunch, food that they
Right.
aren't getting it, and they come in and here this woman is giving them a bowl of chili and some bread and a drink and whatnot. And then she also started a program in the winter called Coats for Kids, where people would donate winter coats
Mm-hmm.
for these little kids who many of them didn't have proper coats in the winter, which can be very cold. And she did this all on her own. To me, that's brave leadership.
Yeah. To recognize that
Yeah,
need.
yeah.
And did she come across any like policies and regulations like, well, you can't feed food to people without a certain
Uh,
license or
Not that I recall, but she likely did.
sure.
I'm not sure. There would always be
There's always
some kind. Yeah,
opposition.
there's always going to be some kind of regulations or whatever. But she did it sort of her own willpower. Did this, and it attracted people to help her to do it. And she would get donations from people. Not from government, just from people to keep this going. And she became a real role model.
Yeah, I was
You
going to
know,
say it sounds like she inspired a lot of
Oh
people
yeah,
then.
yeah, absolutely. I
That's
remember the young
amazing.
woman that came and was sort of her assistant, a young woman that I know was inspired by her, who kind of took the program on when, like, Teresa's quite elderly. Um, and but to me, I know she got national recognition too,
Oh, that's
a national
wonderful.
award and stuff like that for what she did. But to me, that's really making a difference in kids' lives. Like actually feeding them,
I
right?
can see how that memory stands out to you.
Yeah, and you meet others, people who may be famous politicians or whatever, but somebody does something like that to me is really admirable.
That truly is. Um, uh,
Any other one? Do you want me?
yeah. Um, so again, with our brave leader
Right.
concept, is there anyone else who stands out to you?
Well, there is, and this is kind of at the sort of other end of the spectrum in terms of this is a businessman, very successful businessman in Saskatchewan, whose family has been a very prominent sort of business family in Saskatchewan for a couple of 3 generations really.
Wow.
And he, is in land development and things like that, but is a diversified company in media, in oil and gas and things like this. He traveled to India a number of years ago. I'm not sure how many, but at any rate, and actually met Mother Teresa, who was there with a group of people that traveled. And he said to Mother Teresa, he said, "I'd like to do something. Like, what can I do? Can I, like a donation to her work in India or something?" And she said to him, "No, listen, you want to do something, just go back to your country and do something there that's good, right? And that'll be, that's what you can do to help me." So he went back, and he actually used a model of schools in the United States that, and I want to say Arizona was where he kind of modeled it after. But anyways, he started a school in Regina called the Mother Teresa Middle School. And it's, again, in a part of the city where you have underprivileged kids.
Mm-hmm.
And they take, I forget what sort of middle school, so sort of those sorts of grades, and they take kids
Usually like 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Yeah, exactly, and take kids that really need some help, or have real challenges in their life in terms of their situation, their family situation, or whatever.
Take some of those learning obstacles away.
Exactly, and it's created this school with very good teachers. He's financing this thing, and
wow.
And it's been hugely successful. These kids, and they track the kids after they leave the middle school and go into high school. They have, like their counselors would stay in touch with them to kind of help them along the way. And I don't know how many years it's been going now, but I think they've had their 1 or 2 graduating classes that are gone on to into high school, and it's a great thing. And I think he's more proud of that than all his achievements in business.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dale Eisler. And it seems like I get the sense that your view of a brave leader is someone who really reaches out to do something for others.
Yeah, to me, exactly. It makes the world a better place.
It sure does.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dale Eisler, for joining us today. That's our Brave Leaders segment. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Tim.